Hey, what's going on, y'all? This is David the Sunrise to Others coming back at you with another live video. And today I want to talk to you a little bit about reparations. And I'm going to try to make this as fast as I can. So I'll be talking pretty fast here. And sometimes I get into coughing fits. If it gets too bad, I'm going to have to shut the video down and I'll come back and do the rest later. But what I want to talk to you about is reparations for ADOS and why it is absolutely necessary, right? So the first thing I want to address is slavery, right? Oftentimes we don't understand. Without slavery, there is no America, okay? You need to understand that. America, I'll have to go back and do the research, but America was governed by different colonies, different colonies. And these colonies were extensions of different European countries, right? So you had the French, you had the Spanish, you had the Dutch, you had the English, right? Just to name a few. And so they had these colonies that were governed separately of each other. They weren't all one nation, right? And sometimes you don't understand that. You don't think about that, right? That they were different colonies. And so at no point were they ever talk about unifying or unification, right? But who had the biggest problem with the leadership of their colony were the British, right? And so the British decided, and this is I'm not a historian, so I'm just giving you my perspective of what I know about history. So if there are some inconsistencies in what I'm saying, just understand this is an unscripted video. But anyway, so the British had, in the British colony, they had a problem with the leadership of the Brits, right? You heard the term taxation with no representation. So if you read or listen to Patrick Henry's speech, he does a great job of explaining like what it meant to have the foot of the Queen on the neck of this British colony, right? And he was exaggerating in it. Like he was exaggerating, but he was trying to make the point to the people that he was trying to get to fight for their independence, right? So you have to understand that. So through that conflict, right, that colony was the first to break off from its origins, to break off from its origins. And as such, it was a self-governing colony here in the States, right? You had they call it 13 colonies. I may be saying it wrong, but either way, you get the point. Like, you had these British who broke away from British rule to rule themselves here in the States, right? And so they created the Constitution. They created this whole government, right? And it was a marvelous idea. Like, when you look at the Constitution, what it's supposed to represent, it's a marvelous idea, the idea of America itself, even though it wasn't applicable to everybody at the time. And that's another video I'm going to do for you. But anyway, so what you have to understand is what allowed them to be able to break away from the British, right? What allowed them, because you have to understand, slavery started in 1619, right? The Declaration of Independence wasn't until 1777. So you're talking about almost 150 years of rule under colony with slavery, right? 150 years of slavery. And so you'll hear people say stuff like, slavery has always existed in the world, but not like in America, right? Throughout antiquity, right, when you think about the history of the world and what slavery meant, slavery was something that only the aristocrats had. The aristocrats had, meaning you had to already be wealthy to purchase slaves, right? And you use slaves as sort of a status symbol. You know, like if you got I don't know, a Bentley or a Maybach or whatever kind of fancy stuff that is, that acts as a status symbol for your life, right? So if you're wealthy, you get slaves. That was different in America, right? In America, slaves made you wealthy, right? So you could be somebody poor and become wealthy through the ownership of another human being, right? And one of the ways they did it is because, you know, like if you buy a house, if you buy a house, let's say at the bottom of the market, right, and you fix it up and you take care of it and you groom it and you care for it, your house will accrue in equity. You will have equity in the home, right? Because of the value of the home, people's desire to buy the home, the value of it increases without you having to really do any actual work, right? Your house earns you money. Well, it was the same way for the slaves. Like, you could take out a mortgage. So you could be a poor white man. You could take out a mortgage, and then your slaves will work to pay off that mortgage, okay? And if you defaulted on the mortgage, that's how a lot of the black families got broken up, because many slave owners defaulted on the mortgage, and so they had to sell off their assets in order to pay off the debt. That's how a lot of our families got broken up, because they defaulted on a mortgage on your ancestors, not because of they were just simply being cruel, right? The cruelty came in as the fact that you had these other human beings that you could put a mortgage on, that you now had to break up their family to pay off your debt. And so when you understand slavery from that perspective, then you can understand how slaves weren't simply worth money themselves. That's never been the case in human history, right? That people would buy and trade slaves, but it was not for the price that you pay for American slaves, because American slaves existed in a slave economy, right? That if you don't have slavery, you did not have the American economy that you had. So you have to be mindful of that. And so when you understand what the value of the slaves were, plus the work, plus the market, plus the cotton, plus the sugar, plus whatever slaves did, you understand that that without slavery, there is no America, right? Slavery made more money than all other industries in America combined, okay? Just so you can understand what slavery meant to the American economy. So now that you have that picture painted for you, right, I need you to understand that once the slaves were freed, okay, you have these free people who were slaves in a country that never intended for them to be free people. Never intended for them to be free people. So it wasn't like after slavery we got our freedom and we were full citizens, right? You understand, like it took 100 more years of terrorism and legal sanctions from the government, right? And those suppressed our capacity to thrive in a way that other Americans were able to thrive. So when you talk about reparations, reparations isn't simply about slavery, right? It's about the systematic oppression and sanctions placed on black people for no reason other than the fact that they were descendants of slaves, right? Descendants of slaves, meaning you were supposed to be a permanent underclass in this country or not exist in this country at all, right? There were talks about getting us out of the country, right? After they had made all this money off of it, that they built all this wealth, let's get rid of them, right? That conversation was out there. But the point is, you weren't going to be a governing class. There was no way, even Abraham Lincoln said it, like, you know, you shouldn't be slaves, but, you know, there's no way we're going to allow blacks to govern over us. That was Abraham Lincoln, right? The one who freed the slaves. After he freed the slaves, that's him saying that we're not going to have them sit on juries. We're not going to have them be in political positions of authority over white people. That's the understanding, right? And so you understand all of this is happening. So in order for that to happen, we have to be continually suppressed, even as legal citizens now. Now we're legal citizens, but we still have to be continually oppressed because they don't want to compete against us in this market, in this country that was created, right? So you have that situation. And then, so now you have these programs that the government is facilitating to bring about wealth for the masses of America, right? So for the first time in history, there was this enormous wealth transfer when you talk about the WPA, the FHA, otherwise programs developed under the New Deal by Roosevelt, right? So you had this plan that came out, but again, blacks were excluded from those plans. We were excluded from the FHA loans. We were excluded from the WPA loans. We were excluded. We got the GI Bill, but if you can't use the GI Bill to go to school, if you can't use the GI Bill to buy a home, right? Like if you can use the GI Bill, but if you got to buy a home in the ghetto, what's the point, right? And that was the point, that we were redlined and put into these poor slums and communities where the government was not putting resources, right? And all of this is intentionally done by the government, right? So as that is happening, as we are being suppressed, this other class of people is accruing wealth. Now, sometimes I hear people saying do for self, right? Do for self, do for self, do for self. And they talk about the $3 trillion in spending power that we have. But the question that's never asked, about the $3 trillion in spending power is how much does it cost to live in America? Okay, so we spending $3 trillion on Jordans, on weave, on weed, on alcohol, whatever thing you want to talk about, what we spending money on. Understand it's $3 trillion. Now the question is though, and nobody ever asked this, is how much does it cost for ADOS to live in America? And that, my friend, is 17 trillion. 17 trillion. That's why they keep talking about reparations and putting a tag on reparations. I say more towards 19 trillion, but they're saying 17 trillion. So if you have $3 trillion of spending power, but it costs you $17 trillion to live here, how is that spending power? How do you got money? You can't even afford to live here. So it doesn't really matter what you spend $3 trillion on. It's not enough to live here, right? It's like if you have somebody who's dirt poor and broke and they living on the streets and they taking their little money to buy some alcohol or some drugs, and you saying, if you pool that money, like, no, man, they poor and broke. They don't have the money to do anything. Right? And that's what people have to ask, like, what does it cost? And so what reparations is supposed to do is make us full citizenships that reflect our time and effort put in this country, right? And so we go back to 1619, right? And evaluate what our efforts were, what our time is, because you have all these other people who just got here. They all just got here, but not us. Without us, this place doesn't exist for all these other people to come here. So we should be of the highest status of citizens in this country, right? When people talk about George Floyd and he was on drugs, I know, but George Floyd should have been an aristocrat in America, right? He should have been of a superior class, given his people's time, energy, and effort put into this country, right? And that's what reparations is supposed to do. Now, everybody talks about what would happen if we got reparations, right? Like, blacks are going to spend their money on this. They're going to spend all their money on this. Let me tell you something. So I just talked to you earlier in the video, if you pay attention. If you didn't see it, just go back and watch it. And I'll tell you about how poor white people could come to own slaves, take out a mortgage on those slaves, and then accrue wealth with those slaves paying off their own mortgage. And as their value increased, then he would get more slaves, and so on and so on, forth, right? And so you can see wealth building. But they broke up those families because they defaulted on those loans. So I'm saying to you, you had plenty of slave masters who defaulted on loans. And you have to understand how insane this is. Slavery is a foolproof wealth investment. It's foolproof. Like, you can't lose, right? You can't lose. Like, you're going to take a mortgage out on these people, and then they're going to work to pay off the mortgage. Not you working to pay off the mortgage. They are working to pay off the mortgage, right? And so you are accruing all this money from the work that they're doing, right? And it's not like they got a small percentage of it to live, right? You got to feed and clothe them, right? So they got some money, but not enough to accrue the wealth that the master himself was accruing. And so you had people in those circumstances lose their money. Now, nobody ever goes back and say, if you want to look at it, slavery was reparations to white people for nothing, right? But it was payment to white people after the backs of us. And they still lost, okay? The 1862 Homestead Act, look it up. In the 1862 Homestead Act, they were trying to get people on the East Coast and on the East Coast to move west. So what the government did is they told them, okay, we're going to give you 160 acres. All you have to do is pay this filing fee. It was like $25 for this filing fee for 160 acres, right? You got to understand that. But all you had to do was live on it for 5 years. Just live on it for 5 years. After you pay this fee, if you want to understand the context, just go watch a show called Little House on the Prairie. Little House on the Prairie was about these people who got land, and is telling you the story of the context in which they moved west and established these townships, right? But that's what it was, the 160 acres that the government gave them. Now, there's a large portion, more than not, that could not live on their land for 5 years and own 160 acres. Right? So what I'm saying is, us being America is not about us getting reparations and everybody doing the right thing. No, there's going to be a bunch of black people who are going to trick off their money, just like it was a bunch of white slave masters who tricked off their money, just like it was a bunch of white settlers who came to America, got the 160 acres and lost it. Right? So I'm saying we are trying to be full citizens. This is about giving us the opportunities that we should have had as citizens once we were free in 1865, right? Once we freed in 1865, like, I don't even care about slavery. Like, I wish we could take slavery off the table and talk about everything else that happened after 1865, and you still owe us 19 trillion. You still owe us 19 trillion if you take slavery off the table. So stop letting people gaslight you by bringing up slavery. That ain't even the point. You could take slavery off the table, you still owe us 19 trillion because you cheated us out of housing, you cheated us out of land, you cheated us out of education, you cheated us out of everything. You made these racist drug laws, right? That you could take cocaine, and have white people use it in one way and black people use it in another way, and have black people get 25 times the prison sentence. Okay? In America, where we have a justice system, right? A justice system. Did that sound just to you? So I'm saying that this government has intentionally done this to us. Now, if we are going to be considered full citizens, right? Today we live in this society, like everybody, like it's 2020, you know, you can do this, you can do that. I know, but y'all sitting on compounded interest, telling us that your people didn't own slaves. But you got all the opportunities that you needed, son. You got all the opportunities that you needed. If you messed up those opportunities, that's on you. Give us a chance to mess up our opportunities too. That's not what we have. Now, this is the last thing I'm going to talk about. So after the FHA, was established during the New Deal, right? So this is 1930s. So you have 1930 to about 1960 when all these white people bought houses because the government gave them jobs, and then they used the jobs to get low interest rates, and then they bought these houses at very low prices, and then over time, right, the houses, the equity of the homes increased, right? So all of these people had all of what Americans had never had before. Americans never had this before, only the wealthy. But now they had spread this money out to all these other white Americans. So what they had is equity in their homes. And for the first time, they had, I forget the term. Anyway, they had extra money as a result of all of these efforts by the government, right? The New Deal. The New Deal did this. The New Deal built these white suburbs. The New Deal gave them jobs. They were government jobs, right? And they were only temporary. But here's the thing, what happens, right? When you expand a government program like that and everybody get this money, then people have money to invest in private industry. And so the government invested in the people, and then the people invested in themselves. But that's not what we could have done. So I'll tell you this. I'm trying to make this as short as I can, but it's just hard. So you heard of Black Wall Street. Black Wall Street existed at the same time that Sam Walton established Walmart. Okay? And Walmart started, it wasn't even Walmart, right? It was literally called a nickel and dime store, right? Where you can go in the store and buy things for a nickel and dime. It was like what we call a dollar store today or something like that. So what this has meant was that he had time to grow. But while his business was growing as a result of other Americans' income being expanded, them being able to spend more money on more things, expanding the economy, right? We were being suppressed. How were we being suppressed? Because you know what happened to Black Wall Street. What happened to Black Wall Street never happened to white Americans. So then you have all of these white Americans now with these homes, with these extra monies, with these private businesses expanding. All of this is happening for them, but not for you. This isn't happening for you. And all of this is a result of government sanctions. You need to understand that, right? And so their wealth is accruing, and that's how today they got 13 times the wealth that your people have. And so what that means is, if I open a business, let's say I open a restaurant in the neighborhood I live in, the first thing I want to do is I want to take a look at the demographics, right? I want to see how much money is in this neighborhood. Because if I'm going to open a business, I have to know what my price point in my business is going to be. I'm not going to sell filet mignon in a low-income neighborhood. They can't afford filet mignon. So I'm going to sell top sirloin, you know, like what Applebee's sell or something like that. You know, it's not the best steak, but it's a steak, right? You have to make that decision. And what you're looking at is the capacity of the community to support the business. So before the 1930s, there was no capacity for American citizens to support these businesses. So as the New Deal paid dividends to the people that it was intended to pay dividends to, as I said, private industry started expanding. So you had a guy by the name of Ray Kroc. Ray Kroc dropped out of high school in the 10th grade. And after he dropped out of high school, he started to sell like paper cups and paper plates and napkins and like forks to restaurants. And as a result of spending his time in all of these restaurants selling these cups, because he was very good at what he did, he started noticing, right? He started gaining experience at seeing how restaurants can operate more efficiently. So even though he was selling paper products, he also became a consultant for restaurants, right? Because he understood these things. And so he went out to California trying to sell shake machines to two brothers who owned two stores in California called McDonald's, right? And when he saw McDonald's, he was like, hey, we can take this global. And they didn't want to. They was cool with the two stores that they had. They was making money. Their business was, popping, like business was popping for them. Why was business popping for them? Because all these white folks had all this extra money as a result of the equity in their homes increasing, as a result of the New Deal giving them jobs, as the result of them expanding to private businesses. I'm saying we ain't never had that opportunity, okay? No government jobs were extended to us. No housing opportunities were extended to us. In Chicago in 1960, in Chicago, 85% of black homeowners were contract for deed, meaning no bank would give them a loan. And no bank would give them a loan because the government redlined us. Not because the bank redlined us, the government redlined us. The government said if you move into any neighborhood with any black, that becomes a neighborhood that no bank will invest in. So nobody of any wealth will move into that neighborhood, right? So the government did this to us. Now, so what I'm suggesting to you is, just like the government invested into the people and then the people invested into themselves, the government has never invested in us. We got cheated out of those investments. We got cheated out of that part of our citizenship. And so now we can only work for other people because they were the ones who established these businesses, who expanded their businesses, who expanded their economy. And so now they got all these McDonald's, KFC, Pizza Hut, Domino's, Best Buy, Foot Locker. All of these came as a result of the government investment. There's a reason that all of this happened after 1930. After 1930. Like, you have to understand human potential. It always exists, but until the circumstances exist that can produce for us the results that we desire, it's not going to happen. The circumstances have to exist first. And that's the point of reparations. The point of reparations is to give us the opportunities to produce for ourselves what you gave other Americans the opportunities to produce for themselves. That has not happened to us. And so I'm saying, stop saying we got $3 trillion. 17 to 19 trillion is what will make us equal. It will make us able to compete in this economy. Because what you don't understand about business is business doesn't just make money. It costs money. And I'm saying to you, $3 trillion is not enough for us to run business. And our people don't have enough money to spend on us the way we need them to spend on us in order for us to be successful. So what's going to happen is you're going to say, spend money on black businesses, put your money in black banks. But it's all just going to be consumed by white money because their wealth, the velocity of their money is so strong and powerful that it will always suck our money up. So we talk about BET was owned by Bob Johnson, right? And then he sold to Viacom. Why? Because he had expanded as far as he could with black dollars. Couldn't make any more money. But Viacom, on the other hand, can cast a wider net, right? Can cast a wider web because they have more money to invest to get more results that they want. So what you have to understand is that reparations isn't just about how black people spend money. It's also because everybody in our community is not going to be an investor, right? Some people are just going to be spending money. But I know brothers who think economically. And they ain't going to be tricking off their money. They're going to be figuring out ways to secure our community as white people have done theirs. And that's why we need reparations. We don't need reparations just as a handout. We don't need reparations just as a handout. We need reparations to allow us to compete in the economy the way we need to compete in the economy. And $3 trillion ain't going to cut it. You need 17 trillion just to compete. Just to compete. This ain't even to make money. This is to get in. You know, like you go. I know I have a lot of Muslims out there. I'm saying when you go in the casino, you may go sit down at the $5 table. But all the real money is made in that place in the back where you got to have $10,000 just to sit down. And most of us don't have $10,000 to sit down. So we'll never get in that big money place. And to have people come and saying like, you can sit at this table and we can all pool our money together and win at this table. Man, it don't matter how much money you pool together. You sitting at the little table, son. So when we talk about our billionaires, we're talking about $1 to $3 billion. Meanwhile, Bezos got $156 billion. You can't compete. He'll eat you up. He'll drown you out. Just like Sam Walton did with Walmart. Came in, all these mom and pop shops, shut them down. You can't compete with $3 trillion. You can't. So stop saying that. Stop saying we need to invest in ourselves. Stop saying that. No. Reparations or die. And again, reparations is not a handout. It's not a handout. It's payment owed for services rendered. We fought in every war. We were the fundamental basis for the building of this country. It don't happen without us. So we should be an elite class in and of itself. In and of itself. Based on the $94 trillion that white people hold, that's enough for each white person in America to hold $600 million. We ain't got that. We ain't got that. And I'm saying we owe that. That's where we need to be put at. We need to be put at what's average for them, give us that, and then we can compete. And then you can judge us. And then you can call us criminals. And then you can talk about our behavior and the way we act. Because y'all had the opportunities to do better for yourselves while y'all was robbing us and smashing us down.